Welcome to Woodcraft Revival, where we talk about all things wood. Are bandsaw sawmill manufacturers misleading when they talk about the maximum log they can handle on their mills? Let's jump into that. So if you're looking to buy a bandsaw sawmill, or you've already purchased one, probably the primary characteristic that you looked at was the maximum log diameter. How big a log can I actually put on this mill and be able to mill boards out of it? Well, every manufacturer has those specifications, and they'll say, hey, our max log for this mill is X. And usually, they even incorporate it into the name or the model number of their mill. For example, my LM29, that 29 stands for 29-inch diameter log max. This mill doesn't exist anymore. Now it's an LM30, so they grew an inch, basically. And other manufacturers do the same with their model numbers. For example, the Woodland Mills HM122 cuts a 22-inch max diameter log. Hudson's HFE28 cuts a maximum of, you guessed it, 28-inch diameter log. The Wood-Mizer LT28 cuts a maximum of 32 inches. Wood-Mizer's always got to be different. So that number on most of the mills, except for the Wood-Mizer, is talking about the maximum diameter of the log. So the circle part of the log, 29-inch diameter, is the maximum that the LM29 is rated for. The LT28, it says 32-inch diameter, but 28 inch is the width of cut. All mills have those two numbers to look at. You have the diameter, max diameter log, and the actual width of cut. So there's two numbers really you need to be looking at. And let's jump in. We'll look at this 29 and use it as an example. So out of those two numbers, usually the smaller number is the width of cut from guide wheel to guide wheel on any band mill. So this LM29, though it says we can handle a maximum of a 29-inch diameter log, the width of cut between the guide wheels is actually going to be less. In fact, from guide wheel to guide wheel, it is right at 26 inches. Now, much like me, a lot of the cosmetic elements of this mill with age have started to sag. So really, what I'm cutting maximum is about 25. So an LM29 actually only has a cutting width of 25 inches. So is that misleading? Well, let's look back at some of those other manufacturers. So the Woodland Mills HM122, what is its cutting width? 20 inches. The Hudson HFE28, its cutting width is 24 inches. Now the Wood-Mizer LT28, its cutting width is 28 inches. But if you look at the specifications on their page about that specific mill, they'll claim that it can handle a 32-inch diameter log. So before you go calling shenanigans and all these manufacturers and saying, hey, this is kind of a bait and switch, let me give you an example and show you exactly what's going on here. And maybe this visual will help you wrap your brain around it if you're struggling. I figure most of you guys aren't. All right, so I've got this demo log here, which is pretty much the max that I would ever want to try on the mill. What is its width? That's the other thing, a log is never a perfect cylinder, right? So when we look at it here, its width at its widest point is right at 25 inches. Its height, or its width, here at the top is, what is its widest? Yeah, it's about 22 inches. So there's a good 3-inch difference there from this plane to this plane. So technically, this log would be the maximum width of cut that I could make on my LM29 because its throat, its width between the guide wheels, is right at 25 inches. But let's just roll it over here and look and see. All right, so obviously perspective is affecting us a little bit here because I can't get right down on the face of that log with the back side of the mill. So that's a pretty good representation. You can see that that is pretty much maxing out the mill. If I was to come down and cut this right through its widest point, if I was trying to cut through this line, then that would max out the mill, 25-inch diameter log. Now if you go with a diameter log bigger than 25, you can see that's an issue. Well, this is an LM29. Why can't I put a 29-inch log on there and cut that through the center of its widest part. Well, that's the difference. That's not what these bandsaw manufacturers are trying to proclaim, that if you were going to slab wood, then you really need to look at the width of the throat here between the guide wheels for slabbing wood versus saying, well, here's the maximum diameter log you can put on this mill. If I'm taking this 25-inch diameter log and I'm going to mill it the way I would here on the farm, whether it's for 1x material or even timber frame beams, whatever the case may be, then I'm going to start cutting the 4 sides to remove the slabs to create the square cant, as you see drawn out here. I believe this cant is a 16, yeah, it's a 16 3/4 by 16. Because again, we have this extra width. I can get a little bit more width out of the cant than I can vertical height out of the cant. So when I look at this and say, well, here's a 25-inch diameter log, and I'm going to start squaring a cant, when I take that first pass, you can see I've got all kinds of room between my guide wheels. So if I put a 28-inch diameter log on there or a 29-inch diameter log, then I still have plenty of room to cut these slabs away and work down to my cant. So you see, with all this extra space here, when I cut this first slab, I could put a 29-inch diameter log on it because the widest part of that log is going to be lower. And when I cut this first slab off at the 12 o'clock position, then I have plenty of room there. In fact, really my only limitation on this carriage is the carriage frame itself. When we get out here to 30-some inches, then that's when we've got problems. We just got to make sure that the carriage can actually straddle the log. So that's really the limitation you see there. So I think it's important to not only look at the maximum log diameter that the manufacturer says this specific model will handle, but the width of cut, so the distance between guide wheels, so we could actually slab or where your maximum width of passing through a log can be. But there's another number that manufacturers, they list, but they really don't emphasize that as much. And I think it's really important. It's not as important as the maximum width of cut, but it's a close second. And that is the depth of cut. How deep can you go down on a log or a cant before the mill is limited by its structural components? So for example, if I've got this log, it's 25-inch diameter, and I want to actually, for some reason, I want to do a cut and cut these in half. Maybe I was going to try to start doing some quarter sawing and quarter or half and then quarter and turn and start cutting pie shapes to get quarter sawn out. Then I'd want to do a first pass right through the heart. Well, watch what happens if I try to lower this all the way down there. Whoops. So I'm hitting on the cross brace, the support structure of the carriage itself before I even get down there. So what are we looking at? I'm looking at almost 7.5 to 8 inches. Again, my saggy covers coming into play there. But 7.5 to 8 inches is the maximum depth of cut of this LM29. So if I was trying to cut timber frame and I wanted to get 8x8s or 10x10s, those type of things, if I had a log big enough, I couldn't do multiple out of one log because I don't have the ability to go deep enough. I'd have to take one log and cut, whittle the 4 sides off of it to get down to that 10x10 or that 12x12 or 14x14 or 14x10, whatever. Anything that's over 8 inches, I got to take the log and remove the material away from it versus being able to get 2 out of a larger log. So the depth of cut really has nothing to do with the width of the carriage or even how tall the carriage is or how long the bed is. None of those things come into play. It's really the diameter of the wheels. As you can see here, here's the support structure of our frame, of our carriage, and then here's one of the wheels. Well, the diameter of this wheel is 18.5 inches. So if you think about that, if we had larger wheels on this, then this would move the saw blade down further, thus getting it further away from the support structure of the carriage. So a 20-inch, 24, 30-inch, 36-inch diameter wheel is going to give me a much greater depth of cut. It's interesting, when we were at the Paul Bunyan show earlier this fall, Logasol, I believe that's the correct pronunciation. They're a Scandinavian company. They make a sawmill. They had this Slab Master. It's like this massive mill that could handle, I think its width of cut, which I call the throat, its throat was like 54 inches, something insane like that. But they still had tiny wheels on it. And I thought, well, that's really neat that you can slab stuff. And granted, that machine, I'm sure, was manufactured for that slab market where guys are going to be slabbing for tabletops, so they don't want anything thicker than 4 inches. They probably can't even move anything thicker than 4 inches if it's 54 inches wide. But I was looking at that, I was like, well, that's not a well-rounded machine. It's got a really nice wide cut, but it doesn't have depth of cut to give you variables. So if you had that machine, you spent tens of, 20s of thousands of dollars on that machine, then it's kind of a one-trick pony. So while I don't think these numbers are misleading when it talks about maximum log diameter, width of cut, depth of cut, it's just those numbers are things you need to look at. If you're looking at a mill, if you're going to purchase one, depending on what kind of work you want to do on your place, then be sure to do the research on that. Understand what all that means and how it comes into play. That way, when you make the large investment on getting a mill, you can get the work done you want to and not realize afterwards, oh, if I'd have just gotten this one, I'd have been able to do X. Now, you could always say, well, the typical adage is just go with the biggest mill you can afford. And I think 70 to 80% of the time, that's correct. But there's times that application isn't always effective. If you're like me, sometimes you pull the trigger too soon to say, well, this is what I can afford right now, so that's what I'm going to go with. Whereas if you'd have waited a little bit longer and been able to bankroll some more money, then you realize I can now buy the machine that really is going to be the best machine for what I need to do here on the farm. Well, I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, hey, Troy, fire up that mill and let's see what you can do with this big log. Well, I'd love to do that, but let me show you a peek behind the scenes and kind of underscore that old adage of not everything you see on YouTube you can believe. I think this beautiful red oak would look great to make a really good timber frame or mantelpiece or just all kinds of things you could do with it. Well, I couldn't resist. This is that red oak, the big red oak that blew over in the storm this summer that my brother's boys helped me clean up. My boys helped me clean up. I cut this cookie off the stump just to shoot this video to give you guys an example. But don't worry, this log does exist. It's actually all the way down there, and we will get to milling it. I may not mill it with this 29. I may wait till we get the HD 36 set up, and we'll christen her with that log. We'll see how it goes. So stick around. We'll definitely detail it. Well, as I always say, man, I hope you get the opportunity to spend some time outside in God's beautiful creation and hang out with the ones you love, too. We'll see you next time.